I'm sorry, I don't know where. So, like Lisa, this is I think the first time we've kind of chatted. Can you tell me where you're coming from?
Yes, we just, you'd send it out by email and ask us to send in the information, answer the
Right.
spreadsheet, answer the questions. And so I didn't have anything except I just asked about the justice involved because we
Right.
went up significantly this year. But I mean, I know we've done a good job with that,
Yeah.
um, but we've got funding cuts, in our regular allocation, our formula funds, and our justice involved fund. So,
Right.
um, you know, that was my only concern, really.
Well, cool. So, have you been in a couple KPI calls before, or is this your first
Yes,
one?
yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I have.
Okay. Cool. Um, so I can go through the kind of introductions. Uh, I'll still go through them, but just I'll go through them less. Uh, so just as a heads up, we started. I need to hit record.
I've
Okay.
already hit it.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for fumbling through those first few minutes. Um, so this is the fifth time that we've done KPIs. And so there were some changes, right? And so we kind of switched from the state providing just regional information and like letting, say, Grand East figure out how to divide those grand regional guidance. And then, sorry, one second. Sorry about that. Um, so as this is somewhat of a new process in terms of giving out local specific guidance rather than a grand regional. I'd be looking forward to hearing your feedback as it relates to that process because we know that on the one hand it might be a little bit easier on your end. On the other hand, um, like you said, need to be aware of what's going on in your local area, and sometimes the state is a bit removed from that, right? So we might not know about grants coming in or off. We might not know about staffing changes, those kinds of things um, that matters at the local level. So during this call, after this call, it'd be great to hear feedback on that kind of process change, whether or not you would recommend that we keep on keeping on or maybe revert back. So what is our overall aim with KPIs? The thing that we're trying to push forward is becoming the best public workforce system in the nation, right? WIOA has given us kind of 5 core pillars that we're trying to address. The first is increasing access to education, training, and employment, particularly for those with significant barriers to employment. We're trying to align our system, right? So make sure that we're rowing in the same direction. We're trying to improve the quality and labor market relevance of data. And so some good news there is that now now as KPIs themselves have moved over into Wired, that's a great opportunity that should you all come up with kind of reports or some data sets that you can think of that might be help facilitate the achievement of these KPIs, please let us know. You can send an email to wired.info@tn.gov, and we'll be happy to try to fulfill those requests. Next up is we are trying to promote the improvement in structure and delivery of services. Basically, what that means is we want to make sure that wherever possible, we are only asking for a participant's life story once, right? We don't need to be um, collecting their information again and again. And then finally, and this is the one that I'm most excited about, is securing living wages, meeting employers' needs in order to enhance the productivity of Tennessee as a whole. So, given the scope of WIOA, um, these are all things that we are working towards, right? So even though you might see Northeast um, listed here, know that this is a collaborative set of goals, right? And so um, the state can have just as much of an impact on the achievement of those goals. And so there'll definitely be some further explanation on that as we continue. As it relates to federal performance, this is kind of the scorecard that Keith sends out. And just to summarize this, I think we have this locked down. Like we are doing exceptionally well as it relates to federal performance. And so I think that sometimes these conversations kind of lead with federal performance. And just from where I sit, we have some wiggle room there in terms of making sure that we are fulfilling the core objectives of the law. So just some critiques of federal performance. First, it is percentage based, right? So in a scenario where you have one local area that served 160 participants and 128 found jobs, another one might have served 15 participants, but then 13 found jobs. So in this scenario, which local board would be considered to be most successful under federal performance? Any guesses?
B.
Right. And so because it's percentage based, um, local board B would be considered to be higher performing. That being said, when we presented this exact same scenario to the state board, they overwhelmingly supported the idea that we as a American Job Center network should be focusing on more A's, and since that we want to get as many people jobs as possible, right, to accomplish their goals and then grow Tennessee as a whole. So hopefully KPIs are one of the ways that we can address that gap between kind of what federal performance is pushing us to do and what we aim to do. And so as a result of those kind of percentage-based metrics, it was kind of there wasn't a push to serve a quantity of people. It was just those percentages. And so as a result, we've had falling enrollments. And so this is an example of Wagner Pizer before actually KPIs came online. And happy to report that since KPIs came online, we've kind of reversed that trend. Not only have we stabilized, which was the goal for last year, but we've actually started actually growing in Wagner Pizer. Some two further critiques is one, the kind of measures themselves for federal performance is a little bit convoluted. And so hopefully wherever possible in KPIs, when we want to make sure that the goals make sense. And then third and finally is the time periods. So on the top of the scorecards, it might say one particular time range. This is saying program year 21, quarter 3, but we know that it doesn't actually represent one group of people, right? So any one report will be representative of at least 5 overlapping cohorts of rolling 4 quarters, right? So all of that is confusing. And so that's something that we want to avoid. How does this apply to you all is when you're talking to your local board, right? And perhaps you've missed a measure or you've come even close to missing a measure and it becomes a topic of conversation. It's important to remember which cohort you're talking about because it could be that the mistake might have occurred, as far back as 2.5 years ago on the most recent report. So with all that being said, we are tasked by our Commissioner Thomas to make sure that we are measuring the right things, and hopefully KPIs can address that. So WIOA within the context of Tennessee, we like I mentioned before, this is not the first time we've done this, so we have had some feedback along the way. So just to address some of that feedback, first is we want to focus on WIOA wide measures, right, rather than kind of program specific goals. And at least build towards that aim. And then secondly, wherever possible, we want to switch from activity-based measures, aka how busy we are, to how effective we are. And so responding to those constructive pieces of feedback, we are looking at developing these kind of cross-programmatic outcome-based measures. And so what would those look like? The first one might look like something like Directive 55, an education-based outcome measure, which would hit these 4 core pillars of WIOA. Secondly, we're looking at increasing the labor force participation. Notice I did not say the labor force participation rate because the labor force participation rate is percentage based again, 1. And then 2, just for some fun facts here, 1% of the labor force participation rate is representative of 34,100 folks as of 2022. And so if we were trying to grow by an additional 34,100 folks, basically we would be looking at increasing the push for this year, which is kind of generally 5% growth, by 2,061 fold, right? So that is orders of magnitude higher than what we are currently asked to do. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that we want to make sure that we set reasonable, fair, and sustainable goals. And so perhaps a more appropriate goal might be looking at something like how many people did we get across the line from outside the labor force into the labor force last year, and trying to have a growth-oriented goal from what we've kind of already been able to do. And then the third one that we're looking at is, and this is actually one that's progressed far enough that we're adopting as a pilot this year, is securing living wages. And so just to go a little bit deeper on this one, we are trying to align with MIT's living wage calculator. It's a great measure. Are you all already using living wage in Northeast?
No, we're not.
Okay. It would be good to use. I really like it from both a strategic side, which is kind of the conversation for today, but also it's great as a case management tool, right? So like if you have a participant in front of you, when they're deciding like what courses of study to go into, they can figure out, okay, given my family makeup, where I'm living, how many, like what is the dollar amount that I need to be aiming for? And then they can kind of adjust their kind of educational and sector plans accordingly, if that makes sense. So as this is a pilot, we're still working on developing, figuring out what the best way to do this is. So the first thing that we look at is geography, which is basically where someone lives. And so if you notice in Northeast, there's a number of different incomes that someone might need to earn. These colors are just kind of, they match. So like all the blue counties have had the same wage for the particular cohort that I was pulling. And then secondly, household size matters, right? Like how big your family is going to be a big factor in how much income you need to be earning. And then finally is, I'm sorry, my slides are bouncing around. The final thing is, what is the makeup of that household, right? So 2 adults both working with 1 child is probably going to be having to make a very different income than say a single mom with 2 kids, right? So what are signs of a good job that might lead to this? Things like great recruitment and hiring benefits for those who are full and part-time, DEIA, empowerment and representation, jobs and security, organizational culture, pay, which is the primary aim of what this measure would be, and then skills and opportunities for advancement. So these were all pulled out of Teagle 722, which also goes into kind of workforce strategies that we could push to kind of create more opportunities for our participants to achieve these living wages. And so if this little segment sounds fun, please email me at benjamin.passano@tn.gov, and I'll be happy to include you in like the small group that's trying to figure out the bits and bobs to figure out how do we square this kind of existing structure within the context of the data that we have available. Continuing on with constructive feedback, we had 23 KPIs last year, right? Which is a bit overwhelming. And I think that we were probably not having as much emphasis on the key performance indicators. And so this year we've kind of revised those down to have a more targeted 13. And then there are some caveats on that though. So just to speak to those, first is we have two categories that I'm calling funding dependent. And so that would be incumbent worker and on the job training as well as NDWG. And so basically the way to think about this is these are really funding based opportunities, right? So like normally if you all had say like a wildfire, you might receive a federal grant to try to help those specific people. And then normally what comes attached to those that funding opportunity would be some strings attached, right? So basically the KPI would align with whatever we would tell the feds that we would do. And so that's how that would look. And then I have two here listed as on hold, and so those are from TANF, aka Families First. And while they would love to continue as KPIs, right now they're going through a lot of changes. So for those unfamiliar with those changes, TANF is switching from a kind of provider-based model where they contract out a lot of their services to bring in those in-house. And then the second big change is they are switching to a different case management system, right? So with those two big changes happening at the same time, they just want to kind of take a breather, address the KPIs, and then hopefully come back on the other side of those changes. Note here that TANF has a wage attainment goal. And so in kind of hallway conversations with them, they seem open to aligning with that living wage number that we end up coming up with. Finally here, and I do have a footnote here, is actually since conducting this negotiation, even via email, Northern Middle had some constructive feedback on this. And so just to speak to that is, as you know, last year we included an incumbent worker as an opportunity for the adult dislocated worker KPI. And this year we decided to kind of take it out and put it in this kind of funding based model. But Northern Middle had some feedback that was their local board requested that they that they set aside $300,000 to serve 150 folks. And as that is allowable activity, and that would affect how many folks they could serve under the Title I adult dislocated worker, right? Because they would be reducing funds from that pot. We thought that it would make sense to kind of allow them to slightly reduce their goal there, and then report, and then we would be happy to report their progression towards that local goal to the state board. Does that make sense? I know there's lots
Yes.
to untangle there.
Makes sense. All I can think is how nice it would be to have a budget big enough that I could even think about setting aside $300,000.
There you go. And that was we had the same response from Upper Cumberland and Southern Middle. That being said, we just want to be fair in terms of giving everyone that same opportunity, in terms of like if your local board considered incumbent workers to be a priority, we would of course want to adjust down your adult dislocated worker new enrollment goal as well, right? So we just want to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity there. The second kind of piece of response to those pieces of feedback was the living wage as a KPI, of course, which is both WIOA wide, right? So all programs are contributing to this and outcome based. That being said, I want to make sure to make clear that living wage is not our only goal, right? It's back to the 5 goals of WIOA. But hopefully we can bring on those kind of other goals in draft to make sure that we have a great view of kind of many things that we're pushing towards, not just wages. The next piece of feedback was, hey, state, as you were just kind of alluding to, funding is increasingly tight, right? And so wherever possible, please pursue additional sources of funding, requesting that the state do that. And so hopefully that summer youth work experience is a great example of that. And hopefully we can knock that out of the park and even possibly have that be a recurring source of funds, right? The second thing that I wanted to highlight was with Fort Campbell Strong. And so I don't know if those on the call are familiar with that, but basically Marla and her team in Northern Middle basically wrote that application. And then all the state did was kind of put our letterhead on top of it. And so if you all have the capacity, slash if you see an opportunity that you all want to pursue, that might be available to either state agencies or local agencies that you want to partner with us on, we're definitely open to that, those opportunities. And then finally, we want to make sure that we negotiate these KPIs sooner, right? Recognizing that this is August 11th for goals that started in July 1st. And so we want to kind of back up that timeline in order to achieve that that date that is actually inside of our policy to achieve. So one thing, my slides are, I think my wheel is not working. So one thing that I recognize is that we have missed that date, I think the last 3 negotiations in a row. And so one thing that I thought that might be helpful is when I send out this email about the PY23 targets, like the guidance for those targets, I also went ahead and included a forecasted target for the following year for program year 24. And basically how that was derived was I asked, say, hey, JVSG, your goal is 442 this current year. What would it, if you were able to achieve that, what would the goal be that next year, right? And so hopefully this can be helpful to see how aggressive the state is wanting to be on these measures. And in the world where we were not able to give you the guidance before the start of the program year, that you could use this as a fallback. Because we definitely recognize that not only do we want to get things out the door by July 1st, but we want to do that even before then so that you can possibly even include those in your provider contracts, right? Moving into specific feedback as it relates to this this negotiation process. Here, we had one kind of comment that was carried throughout, which I just quoted Southeast for this, talking about carrying capacity, right? So if we increase enrollment targets while decreasing funding year over year, that compromises our service delivery quality, right? So I think that's a great piece of feedback, and I will go into that in greater detail in a second. And then secondly, what is the American Job Center's impact to secure living wages? That's that TEGL I was referencing earlier. And then incumbent worker we just talked about. And then finally, making sure that you all have the appropriate KPI contacts as it relates to each subject matter expert at the state level. So I still have, that's one of my things that I want to get done before I send you all the official version of this recording and the slides. So so this is kind of that timeline that we just talked about. And again, we want to make sure that we get all the information that you need well before July 1st. So we have figured out how big the pie is, what our kind of overall objectives are. And so what we're doing today is kind of finalizing how we divide that pie into slices. So this is moving into the meat of the conversation today. This is what adult and dislocated worker looks like across the state. Basically, this black line is the state. The dotted line will be the targets, and then these are the subsets of West, Middle, and East. So if we zoom in on Northeast, this is what you all are looking like. So it seems like this 49 across that we've agreed to makes sense. Um, the only other comment that I had here was on the dislocated worker front. Is that just kind of a natural thing in terms of where like aligning with where the need is for adult versus dislocated worker?
Lisa, are you there? If you're talking, you're on mute.
Now, I was looking at I was looking at this graph,
Mhm.
studying it a little bit. So will you ask your question again? Because I was looking at the graph and studying it.
Sure. So basically, it seems like Northeast is a little bit unique in terms of um, how much you all have in terms of the adult side versus the adult and dislocated worker side, which is fine. Like I just was, it just was a thing to comment on in terms of um, are you all particularly prioritizing serving adults over dislocated workers or
No, we are not, but it just so happens, and you've probably heard this.
mhm,
We even take the UI list and try to contact those people,
mhm,
just even if it's a mass email, just to uh, let them know our events and to promote our services. And dislocated workers, we just find that and they tell us, oh, we're going to ride it out for a while.
right.
Um, and we're going to ride it out for a while and see what our, unemployment looks like, or take some time off. And I know at the state, maybe you all don't understand that as much, but that's what we see on the front lines. And like Destiny said there in the comments, in the past
Mhm,
year, we had the National Dislocated Worker, and
right.
that absorbed some of our, because we just had such high targets with that, trying to meet that, you
Right.
know. So
And
that was a couple of things happened this year.
and thank you for that feedback. One thing is with the National Dislocated Worker, where it makes sense to where they're eligible for, of course, um, co-enrollment would be great,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
is actually a way to kind of do two birds with one stone as it relates to KPIs. About you will get credit for not just the NDWG side, but also the Title I Dislocated Worker.
We did co-enrollments, and we also had to do some adult and National Dislocated Worker co-enrollments as well.
Great.
But that was just a couple of things that why it looks maybe like that this year. But I mean, more
No,
important,
yeah, it's
I
not
don't,
like a good or a bad thing. It's
yeah,
just like what's going on.
I don't understand it myself, because if I got laid off, I would need an income, but a
Right.
lot of people are finding that they can live on their unemployment, and wanting to push those boundaries is just what we're seeing a lot. So,
Right. Or the economy is so hot that they can just get a job immediately, right?
right.
Um, and this is kind of a graph of the incumbent worker thing that we were seeing nationally, right? So there's huge spikes and swings. And so it's very hard to set a target for. And this is kind of why we've kind of pulled it off as a KPI. And that being said, I know, Brian, you're saying that it doesn't really make sense right now, given how much funding you all have, but should that change, happy to adopt that as a local measure. We already talked about Northern Middle. Um, there's also responding to that Southeast quote that I just gave earlier about funding going down and targets going up and how that might affect quality of services. I thought that was a great comment, and we have kind of two points that we wanted to address that. The first is we've kind of already informally, well, to back up, like, so we've already split off reportables from participants, right? We said if you need to have a staff intensive service to be considered to be a participant, but perhaps we need to kind of divide that further via technical assistance in terms of within an enrollment, there seems to be, at least informally, a group of participants that receives direct kind of supportive services and tuition, just kind of participant-based funds. And then there's another group of people I just threw out here as an acronym because usually those stick, of SBPs or something like service-based participants. And so the reason that I'm bringing this up is sometimes enrollment might be low for a particular program in the state, and the response will be, well, we didn't have funding, or our funding is tight right now. And so basically, hopefully, I was talking with Matt and Troy earlier last week, and talking about maybe we can kind of formalize this terminology and kind of build a training around like what kind of services could be delivered in terms of that still trigger participation, that still align with the needs of the participant, while at the same time granting you all more opportunities. So that seems like a way from a kind of a services approach that we could kind of address that concern. I know that is up a bit. In some ways, it's a new concept. In other ways, it's kind of like things are kind of already happening that way. Do you all have any comments on that?
I just don't think that there's a lot that we can offer participants that don't, cost something. We try to offer like some job search assistance and stuff like that. That's a very low cost. But I feel like that job search in general is maybe, that's a free service that we could really target. But, that really is a Wagner Pfizer function as well. So they would be providing that. So I can't think of a lot right off the top of my head that we could.
Well, Title I can still provide referrals to employment, right? They can still
Oh,
talk
sure.
about your resume development. They can still do those things. And so basically that's kind of where this comment is coming from about, honestly, like normally if I run into someone who's like a civilian in terms of like they don't understand the American Job Center network at all, they're like, what do you do? My response has typically been, I help run a convoluted scholarship program, right? Which I think is somewhat true, but I think is increasingly not true, especially as our funding continues to drop off. And so basically, I think that this is a great opportunity for us to kind of rethink, like, what is the purpose of the American Job Centers, including all the titles under it, right? So I think that this is a great opportunity to kind of crystallize what might already be occurring in some places, right? I don't know. Are you all part of the Work First team? I know Northern Middle has joined the force.
Well, we prefer that,
Mhm.
all the time, but it doesn't always happen. Um, so, but
I
we
think
have
that
not, I guess we've not made that clear that I guess that needs to be a priority from the board standpoint, especially, we have a new provider. So we were going to be doing some training, Brian and I, about the whole system. So we can, certainly include that in there. But I find, just because I've come through the system for a long time and been in the different positions, and I've been a case manager, um, our 12-month follow-up, a lot of people don't want to be enrolled with us and us bug them from their perspective for
Mhm.
12 months, and they're not seeing as much value. So that's one thing that I think is a hindrance just from, my perspective. And we've been told that.
Right.
And they understand from the beginning, and they sign a form. I understand I will be followed, for 12 months, and I need to stay in contact with my case manager or whatever. But after they get what they want, that's not so easy. They're not so willing for us to
Right.
bug them for 12 months. So I think especially without providing dollars, that makes that more difficult because we do have that 12-month follow-up after exit, and we lose them a lot of times.
Right.
I think
I
that
did.
the work,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think that the work that we do naturally lends itself to a work
Mhm.
first mentality. The
Mhm.
whole goal is to get people the skills that they need to find sustainable employment. And naturally, if they have a skill, we're
Right.
going to move them towards employment rather than enroll them in training. They're not going to be eligible for training if they have a skill that's
Right.
marketable.
Mhm.
So I think this whole work first thing is really more using a buzzword and a
Right.
catchphrase um, to to I don't know for what reasons, but
Mhm.
if you ask if we're work first, yes, we are and we always have been, just by the very nature of our programming and the
And
requirements to
and to be clear,
enroll.
I'm not trying to push that approach. I just like
I know
that
you're
is
not.
that yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just felt like I had to speak up on that. And the other thing that
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about is, and I know that I'm not the voice for this.
Mhm.
Lisa is, but you know me, I can't keep my mouth shut.
Oh, this is
Um,
there's everybody on this call should be willing or open to being able to speak up for sure. Like this is
the other big
yeah.
concern that I have when we go back to the example you shared of the 15 people that were enrolled and 13 got jobs
Mhm.
versus 120 and blah, but the percentage
Right.
was higher on one and the numbers were higher on the other.
Right.
We increasingly seem to be focusing on more and more numbers
Mhm.
and not a higher percentage.
Right.
One issue that we've got, and Lisa and I are working on coming up with ways to combat this locally,
Mhm.
is the services, the professionalism, the functional alignment of the folks in the AJCs staff-wise
Right.
continues to decline.
Mhm.
I feel like this is going to only help that happen further. If we focus more on more and more numbers, I feel like the quality of service is going to suffer further.
Right.
While I
And
agree we need to reach as many people as we can,
right.
I'm concerned that due to the state of the AJCs right now,
Mhm.
um, we're only going to be throwing gasoline onto the fire.
Right. And to be clear, these comments are not saying like you let's serve yet another population. This particular comment was related to like given those constraints of uh expectations versus funding, right? That perhaps this kind of broader service delivery mindset, if you want to put it in that context, might be beneficial to meet both the needs of leadership and participants. One thing that I think that was brought up on other calls was how does this affect MPCR, right? And so, as you all know, that MPCR is actually not at the individual level; it's a line item, right? So if we look at like how many funds are going towards tuition and some of these supportive services that are considered to be direct participant costs. It's just how much of your funding is going towards those. So what could happen is if you all are currently doing serving a lot of participants with direct participant costs, but having a kind of a shallow amount of funds dedicated to those participants, perhaps with this lens, you might be able to kind of reallocate some of the funds to more of the kind of harder to serve populations that need more higher touch, right? And so hopefully that might help out with the percentages as it relates to, say, like better performance. So by providing someone with a higher level of supportive services or opening up more training opportunities, one thing to evaluate is hopefully this might be a way that we can finally raise those ITA caps, right? And not just do truck driving, truck driving, truck driving. So I know we've kind of gone pretty deep on this this point here, but I think your points were well taken on not only that, but are we even measuring the right thing as it relates to KPIs? I think like I said, this is year 5, right? And so I think that at some point, if we are happy with our carrying capacity, then we need to move beyond how busy we are, which is new enrollments, right? And we need to be looking at something more outcome based, and hopefully things like living wage and those other ones, we can be building towards that. The second piece of feedback, or the second kind of response that we had to that same feedback, is from the money side of things, right? And so definitely want to recognize that we don't always have additional funding available, but if we do, it'd be great for the state to take a more proactive approach as it relates to this. And so what a good example of this was this past year, Greater Memphis was able to achieve 135% of their adult dislocated worker goal after Q3 of the year. And then in Q4, their enrollments dropped off significantly. Like I think they only did like 35% of their stated quarterly goal. And so the way that we the state want to view that is we the state need to be more proactive in reaching out in terms of, rather than say, oh, just apply, or you can just apply for additional funds, whether or not that'll work out, right? I think it'd be great for us to be more proactive in that approach and say, hey, you all blew out your goal out of the water in this traditional kind of training approach, in the lens of the traditional service delivery approach. Greatly exceeding your goal probably means you're going to be out of funds, right? And so from a financial piece, I think it'd be great that we could recognize high performing areas that have achieved the stated goals that the state has asked them to do, and perhaps, where available, move funding around so they can continue to perform at those high levels.
So in the spirit of that statement right there,
Right.
We are an extremely high performing area when it comes to justice involved individuals.
Right.
The result of that is we've had our KPIs almost tripled, and our
Mhm.
budget for that particular, whether that be extra money that's come along or our
Mhm.
formula funding, our budget has been cut in half for that.
Right.
So that's kind of the exact opposite of what was just said.
Right. So I'm just flipping over to justice involved to just
Another concern while you're doing that, another
yeah.
concern I have with justice involved,
Mhm.
we have a partnership through the First Tennessee Development District. They've gotten a grant for a program that I'm sure you've heard of because we've bragged
Mhm.
about it for 2
Right.
years now.
Yeah.
Caring Workplaces.
Mhm.
Caring Workplaces has contributed huge amount of numbers to our justice involved enrollments because it was a
Mhm.
partnership between the Development District and their Caring Workplaces program and our American Job Center system.
Mhm.
Their funding for that, unless they get some sort of renewal or extension, ends in September.
Mhm.
And I'm concerned that we're going to see a drop off in the number of justice involved enrollments that we've got as a result of that. Yet our KPI, our goals for that is increasing almost threefold.
Right. Thank you for that. I've been actually kind of noting on my scratch paper here, like there seems to be, like, given that funding is decreasing, how is that affecting each area. I think that's been a common theme throughout these calls. Like, for example, Northern Middle is cutting off, I think, 3 other in-school youth providers. It sounds like you all may or may not be able to continue a best practice of caring workplace with justice involved, right?
Yeah. Well, there's another thing we're having to try to come up with other ways to continue too. We've started a training program in one of our county jails,
Mhm.
and we were told by the Office of Reentry to go ahead and plan for continuing that training program, that there would be another batch of funding coming out.
Right.
So we did that. We got with TCAT, we got with the jail, we got everything set up and ready to go. And then we're told, oh yeah, by the way, you're not getting any money on that. You're only getting, I don't know, Lisa, what was it, half?
We got 30, well, we actually got 41,000 this past year, and we're gonna be at, it's 25, but of course it'll be 2250 for the programs and just giving us a little admin, for that. But, so it is almost half. And honestly, being this
Right.
TCAT's working with us, and they're going to serve twice as many as we did this year on half the money, just out of the goodness of their hearts and our partnership. Because that's the first behind the bars program they have. And you put on your email about
Mhm.
best practices. I think
Right.
this is the best practice, the first behind bars program that they've ever offered. And they said the first, and I don't have the uh, proof, I don't know. They know. They said the first
Mhm.
TCAT in the state of Tennessee to offer to do a post-secondary training and graduation, behind bars.
Which
And
TCAT is this,
so,
you said?
I'm sorry,
Which TCAT did you say?
Elizabethton.
Elizabeth?
And so, and the trainers, I have one of their employees does dual enrollment in high schools, and teaches at the college campus. And he told me, he said, when can we start again? He said, this is by far my favorite group to
Mhm.
work with, the inmates. So we're going to serve twice as many with half the
Mhm.
money. But TCAT has said we can't sustain that long term, of course,
Right.
because they got 4 employees they are dedicating to this so that we can get this started and have a best practice and have a good, program behind bars. But we've already talked, the TCAT and myself, that, we have to look for additional funding dollars.
Right. So there was a lot there to unpack. One thing is, I definitely think it'd be great to document kind of in a kind of theme way from all these areas, talking about, like, given that funding is going down, exactly how this affecting things, right? And so I think that would be a great thing to kind of highlight about, like, should we pursue additional sources of funding, and what areas should we be pursuing that, right? So, like, you all were talking about justice involved, as it seems like a thing that Northeast wants to push, that there's demand for that. There's partnerships out
Yes.
there. And so I think, like, that's something that's great constructive feedback that I think we could push to move on, right? Luke, do you have any additional comments uh, as it relates to that seemingly best practice?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics around the grant that is being reduced, unfortunately. But Office of Reentry is always looking for extra funds to be able to try and combat these issues. We don't always get to control the amount that we get to give out per area. And so, yeah, obviously it's not personal, but, like, this is happening in more than just Northeast. I would say that, Northeast TCAT's proposal for the CRRG program,
Mm-hmm.
I believe I read it, and I believe it was pretty good, and it went forward. So I think there may be some funds coming from that angle, but I'm not quite sure on the on the justice involved grant. I think that grant is ending.
That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be negative, but the Office of Reentry, we got the email saying that we were finishing that training, our previous training June 30th, and to get our next cohorts ready and get ready to roll, because there was going to be more funding. So we did that, and we worked with the TCATs, and they, got their schedule ready, the jails ready, and then, we got the email saying, oh, but you're only getting $25,000. So we did what we thought we were supposed to, move forward with the duplication of the program that we had, because I understand they want to, the Office of Reentry wants to follow it for, a longer period and get outcomes. And, so do we, very much so. And we had said that our staff would, stay involved with the jail and follow it, even in the absence of funding, because we're very interested in the outcomes, and what the inmates do, when they leave. But that's kind of where we were. And then we had to go back to TCAT and say, sorry, we don't have the same amount of money. We've been cut. And the jail was kind of upset, and they sent Dr. Arnold an email saying, we felt like you were telling us to get ready to do this again, then you're coming back and saying you don't have the same money. So they were very nice about it, but they're very kind of upset about it. And we didn't make any promises. We just said, this is the information we have. Let's get the next cohorts ready, and we'll be ready to roll when the money's there. And then, that was the result.
Yeah,
and not to belabor the money point, because I know that's not really the topic here, but
no, it definitely influences.
It influences it, and it just, my concern is we seem to have this theme of increasing how many humans or numbers we need to touch or increase with an ever decreasing budget, and particularly, and I understand it's that way all over the state, but we've reached kind of a critical point where we can't continue to increase on less. The other goals, I think, seem to take that into account, but the almost tripling of this justice involved KPI is concerning when you look at the possibility of our supply dwindling in regards to the caring workplaces. I'm worried that increasing our requirement is going to set us up for a disastrous failure should they not be able to continue that program.
Right, and thank you for that feedback. Honestly, the way that I was viewing this was not from the service delivery standpoint, which it sounds like you did. You pursued new relationships to get these numbers high. I was perceiving, and this has kind of been true generally across the state, is it's mainly come from a data entry standpoint, right? About marking the people that we're already serving as justice involved, and the onset about participants being able to self-identify, right? From that lens. And so that's
when we
yeah.
got, and I don't mean to interrupt you, when the
No, yeah,
governor,
sure.
made the justice involved individuals a priority, we actively pursued those partnerships, the people that are serving these people, so that we could find them more easily and not just wait for them to come in our doors, and at the same time, these programs that we provide, they learn about the AJCs and they will come in our doors. But, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg thing. We felt like we had to have the partnerships or needed the partnerships up front to start the process of getting more justice involved individuals familiar with what we do and with our system.
So I guess just to summarize where we're at as it relates to KPIs, right, to bring this conversation home, I think initially before this conversation, I was actually recommending that the state maintain the request. I think it was 109 per quarter times 4, something like that. Luke, hearing this feedback that this meteoric rise, which I think is actually a best practice, I just thought it might have come from the data. But if we're saying it's coming from service delivery and that service delivery is somewhat in question as relates to funding, is that a good kind of summary of this conversation?
Yes, we this is not coming from an increase in data entry. This is
Okay.
active,
This is
very
real,
purposeful
yeah, shoulder to the
partnerships
grindstone.
that have
Yeah.
created these numbers.
So, Luke, would you be okay with the numbers that they submitted, aka this 87, 88, 88, 87, which is more than doubling what we asked them to do last year?
So based on
yeah.
the context of this conversation, I want to go ahead and say yes. Unfortunately, it's not up to me. I need to make a phone call. Let me make a phone call offline on this from this chat, and I'll chime back in here in a minute.
And so basically, for that phone call, the numbers that the state was proposing was 109 a quarter. They are requesting 87 a quarter, and then we had a target 42 a quarter last year. So for just some quick numbers. Okay. So
I'll get back to you in just a minute.
Thank you, Luke. We'll jump back to where we were before that, and thank you for that great conversation. That's the whole purpose of these calls, is to kind of understand more about what's going on.
Yeah, I don't want to seem argumentative and difficult, because that's
No,
certainly
absolutely.
not my intent. It's just I don't want to set us up to fail. I think we're doing a lot of great things up here. You know, we've had a lot of changes in the last couple of years in Northeast, and I think we're headed in a great direction. I don't want to set us up to fail in something when we're on such a great trajectory. And, you know, come September, if we find out that the development district is getting re-upped on that Caring Workplaces fund, then the next time we have this conversation, you won't hear me argue about that about it at all.
And to be clear, this is the only this is the only thing that you all had a concern about.
Yeah,
too,
well,
right?
it's like trying to build, it's trying to build a log cabin and finding out in 3 months there's going to be a supply shortage of logs. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here.
No, comments well
we're
received.
not going to stop our work by any means. We're going to continue these partnerships because we've really created some great partnerships, and I work to try to keep them just like the jail was upset. And Brian and I went and met with them last week and proposed some different solutions to maybe, funding and stuff. And they're very workable and they're very nice, but we certainly don't want to ruin those relationships just because we say, sorry, we have no funding. We're going to keep doing what we do, but this, the other program that, Brian's talking about, the Caring Workplaces, has been instrumental in our numbers. I mean, we still have numbers, but just what we can provide as board staff and what the AJCs are providing, it just wouldn't be the same level, of numbers, but we'll just keep plugging away at it.
Yeah, we're looking at alternatives, like, for instance, the possibility of Coursera coming on to the tablets is a good cost-effective thing too. But anecdotally, and we don't have any official data to support this yet, because it's really too soon for it to be an official measure. But anecdotally, since we have begun offering American Job Center courses, adult ed courses, or adult ed programming, the training courses from TCAT in this jail, recidivism rates have shown that it's looking like it's between a 40 and a 50% decrease in recidivism rates. Again, that's anecdotally, that's not official, because it's too soon for an official measure on that. But they are actively looking at that. We're actively looking at that with them. And like Lisa said, we're going to continue the work that we're doing. I just don't want to see our requirements so high that we're going to fail it.
Right. We definitely want to set fair, reasonable, sustainable goals. One thing that I So two things that you brought up that I wanted to respond to. One is when you all have a best practice that I think like this would be and justice involved, please make sure. I know like you were asked 1,000 times, what are your best practices and all kinds of emails and things. One way that is actually I think beneficial is the state board's innovation committee. So what the state board's innovation committee is actually trying to have basically one LWDA per meeting present a best practice. And
We've
so I
already,
just
we were the
right.
first ones.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you already jumped in on that one.
Yeah,
Yes.
But
they
just
had us
right.
present on caring workplaces and on another
Career
initiative
Quest.
that's going
Yeah.
on up here called Career Quest.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I just
For
want to make sure
youth.
that
Youth
you all are
program.
not only aware of, but you've already done that. So
Yes.
so that's one opportunity there. And then the second one, as it relates to things that you are reporting to your local board, some areas, I'm not sure whether or not this is the case in Northeast, kind of has a separate kind of document of local KPIs of sorts, local initiatives that you share with your local board. I think it might be beneficial, and this is just it would be nice if you prefer to share that with us, we can pass it on to the state board as well, because I think that also provides further context about like maybe for this measure it's a little bit lower than it might have been expected because your push, your passion might be slightly to the left of that. That makes sense. So
And
Uh,
Ben, I
yeah.
wrote all this up in the final report for the
Mhm.
last, the justice involved reports that were due.
Mhm.
And the inmates wrote letters, how it's, helped them and changed their lives and all that. And I attached all that to my final reports.
Great.
So I don't know if that's something that you would want me to share with you to look
Right,
at.
and like I'm kind of more the facilitator, right? Like the state board is who we want to make sure knows about that. So like on a quarterly basis, if you are sharing, to your point, like maybe it's not just numbers, maybe it's more like best practices or those kinds of things. I'd be happy to pass those along and include them within my report, if that makes sense. I could say these are state-based KPIs, and then these are local supplements, if we want to
Okay,
refer to it
sure.
that way. Yeah. On to apprenticeships. So with apprenticeship, I know this is a bit indirect, but just to be aware of what their goals are for apprenticeship is they have a peak enrollment goal this year as one of their KPIs, and then secondly is they want to increase the number of state certified pre-apprenticeship programs, right? And so when you all are talking with participants on the peak enrollment side or employers on the program development side, that might make sense to fit in with the apprenticeship program, please let Autumn Derrick know as a new person in Grand East. So that's my comments on apprenticeships. For JVSG, this is what we're looking like as a state. Notably, I don't think Jeff was able to join our call on this one, but basically, we have been seeing growth quarter over quarter, which is great for JVSG. That being said, we have had the chronic issue of JVSG staff finding participants jobs that make more money than they do, which is great. But the problem is that that causes high turnover, right, from the staff side. So one of the things that Jeff and his team were able to get across the line was actually consolidate positions to be able to increase the salaries of staff on the JVSG team. And so hopefully that will translate to you all about having more consistent staff with more and more experience. And that'll help us on the state side rather than have to train people, they leave, train people, they leave, train people, they leave, right? So that's kind of like the big thing going on in the JVSG world. And this is kind of what your historical enrollment looks like and then your goal. So just so you know how these goals were derived was basically JVSG is one of the things where the state actually kind of determines where the staff go. And so basically, because we had that information, we aligned the state goal. We divvied it out based on the FTEs within each area. So that's how we came up with the 777s across for TSG. For justice involved, Luke, are you back with all kinds of information?
I'm not.
Okay.
Unfortunately, William is on leave, so I'm trying
Okay.
to sort that out.
Okay.
Just give me
So
a few minutes.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. So the other comment as it relates to justice involved is like, hey, who's included in this metric? Making sure that you all know that, of course, all the different programs are contributing to this. It's not just Title I Weiner Pizer folks, right? So adult education, BR, all those numbers are continuing to count towards this measure. And so that map is the new service providers map for adult education. For RISA, this is kind of what Tennessee looks like as a whole, so ticking up slightly. I know Gail had said she had to step out. Are you back, Gail?
I am.
Do you want to talk about kind of how we came up with the goals this year for RISA?
I think we went up slightly. Is that correct?
Right. We're just aligning with that the guidance.
Right. So just wanted to let everybody know that we will probably not have to be transferring any claimants once our data collection starts to other areas. So that should take care of that issue. The number that you will have to serve will be slightly less. Our ratio of people receiving treatment to people not is 2 will receive the treatment and 1 will be in a control group. That evaluation will probably take at least a year, maybe longer, to get all the data that's needed. So that's coming up on your radar.
So basically to summarize this is we are aligning with the my slides are popping around and I'm not touching anything. This is not where I want to be. Okay. What about there? Okay. For years now, for RISA, we've said we want 50% of folks who come through the door, who attend the RISA orientation, to be referred to Title I, right? And then 25% of those who are referred to actually be co-enrolled. That's kind of where we came up with the goals overall. And then what Ms. Age was talking about was there's some variability there, right? In terms of predicting how many orientations sessions are we going to have this year, right? So there's 2 factors that are at play. One, that was just mentioned, because of this kind of control group experiment thing, that's going to reduce the number of people who might have been coming to our orientations. And then the other factor is, of course, the number of folks who are in the research program varies widely based on how the economy is doing, right? So at one point, the numbers might be going down. It also might mean that the numbers might be tenfold what they were last year, right? So
We don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict what's going to happen.
right. And so basically what KPIs are trying to do is, as best as possible, match with that guidance. And so should things vary widely, then we would say, well, this is one of the reasons why, right? So the other thing is looking at your actual achievement for RISA, right? It's kind of been, I don't know if I want to use the word dead, but there's not been a lot of enrollments as relates to RISA. Has there been anything like programmatic going on to affect that?
I feel like we're going to do better this year with a new service provider, so I'll just leave it at that.
Great. And then should your new service provider want any additional training or support, we're definitely there to help out. And I think I already went to this slide like 5 times because my slides so keep going around. But one thing to maybe refer your staff to is as colleagues Southern Middle, because they are kind of, I think, in a similar kind of financial situation that you all are in, but has been able to figure out how to move these referrals into actual co-enrollment. So
We'll
that's
watch
just,
that, Ben, because I've gotten feedback that there was some issues, and that there were some issues, and I'll be watching those to see if they really were, then we should see a significant improvement.
Right.
Well, and I can always connect us with Selena Moore too,
Mhm.
and we could probably even work out, if they're doing something there that's working,
Mhm.
maybe we could have them coach us a
Sure.
little bit and teach
Oh,
us.
always, always. I'm not saying we can always, we're always open for that. I was just
Yeah.
saying that I've been made aware that there were maybe some issues that I hope we'll see a big turnaround.
Right. And I believe Southern Middle was saying specifically their OSO was doing some great work here.
Yeah, we've and Lisa was trying to be kind, and
Oh,
I'm not,
I'm
but
the
we
hint
had
is
a really
we see.
weak OSO,
Mhm.
and we've had a lot of issues with our prior Title I service provider, both of which
Mhm.
we have changed. We've got a new OSO that's
Mhm.
showing a tremendous amount of promise.
That's great.
And as you know, our new CSP is Northeast State Community College under Holly
Mhm.
Freeholler's leadership.
Right.
So
There
we're
you
seeing a
go.
lot of positive signs about the future there with that as well. And I think that's what Lisa was trying to say.
Oh, y'all are gonna kill it with Holly for y'all. I'm kind of jealous, honestly.
Yeah, we
Um,
think so.
Yes,
uh,
please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you need us to provide training to any of the new career service provider staff. We're happy to do that.
or if
Gail, would we contact Steve for that?
Yeah, just get in touch with him and he should be able to set something up for you.
Okay, because we have a couple that they might benefit. I mean, it wouldn't hurt at all that, and they would welcome the training.
Okay, are they, we have training next week scheduled in Nashville. Do you know if they're scheduled to come to that?
You asked me, Gail, about coming, and you sent that out to
Yeah.
Rebecca Ball.
Yeah.
And I do not know if she is able to come. I know
Gotcha.
they're pretty swamped right now. Do you know if
Gotcha.
she's RSVP'd? I'm not
She,
sure.
she has, to my knowledge, not. What we're also planning is a training for the managers after we get done with the staff training. So I will be letting you all know when we're going to
Great.
schedule that. That will be virtual.
Great, thank you.
excellent. For CSEP, just to include you all in the loop on the conversation that we had with the CSEP providers, is we had 2 goals last year, right? We're reducing those to 1 while we're still measuring number of people who exited it into unsubsidized employment, as that's the primary purpose of CSEP. We thought that the push this year would be focused on vacancies. And so moving like just trying to stabilize, not go any further down in terms of how many slots are available. And so the push this year, just so you know, for First Tennessee HRA is to serve 8 new participants, which is 1/3 of their dedicated slots.
Ben, could I say that
Yeah.
that's First Tennessee Development District, because we do have an HRA, but that's not us.
Right, right, and that's known. I just trying to say, like, just kind of like apprenticeships. This is a bit tangential, but just to be aware, should folks come in that would benefit from CSEP programs, that we could definitely
Oh,
refer
I
them.
know what you're saying. Okay,
Yeah.
the HRA doing the CSEP. I got you.
Right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so 3 pieces of feedback that they wanted me to relay here. One, CSEP providers ask that when you have your AJC business services team meetings, please include First Tennessee HRA in those to make sure that those referrals are coming through. Secondly, looks like Nestor and Lance are not able to make this call, but we recognize that there's an increasingly broad spread between the marketplace and what CSEP is able to support, right? Minimum wage is very different than $15-20 an hour. So we are trying to work with our FBO to hopefully narrow that gap from both a wages side and how many hours CSEP participants may be able to work. And then third, we are looking at auditing the host agencies, aka the employers who are hosting those participants to ensure that they are aligning with CSEP submission. Candidly, some of the CSEP host agencies have kind of been abusing the system in terms of having this kind of free or reduced labor, but with no intention of hiring them on, right? So we want to make sure that we are working to develop a larger list of host agencies. I also had on that previous slide contact information with the link should you all need that to make sure that those folks are invited to your business services team meetings. On to SNAP. This is what we're looking like as a state. So we noticed that this is kind of where we're at before KPIs came online, and we had a big surge, and then we had a big dip after we had SNAP ENT as a KPI. Of course, the state, weren't pushing SNAP ENT new enrollments, right? We were looking more at qualitative measures last year. This year, we're reverting back to looking at SNAP ENT new enrollments. Why? Because the thinking is that leadership has changed on both sides, from our side and their side, and we think that there's a possibility that, again, back to pursuing additional sources of funding, if we enroll more people with SNAP ENT, we might be able to get more money from DHS, right? So that's why we're pushing SNAP ENT new enrollments. And so this is kind of your historical numbers and then the goal there. Any kind of additional comments on SNAP?
No.
All right. With trade, we continue to pursue 90% co-enrollment rate. Myra, did you have any additional comments on trade?
I do not. Hopefully, there's no confusion of who can be served, but we're doing open houses and doing a lot of outreach activities. So hopefully that will help us to increase participation. That's one of the major push from everywhere, including USDOL and the state of Tennessee. So we have to increase participation. So this will um, help us, everybody, to have more individuals requesting services. So those co-enrollments needs to continue happening.
Thank you, Myra. For Wagner Pizer, and we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but we have been able to increase enrollment as a state. Looking at Northeast, it's kind of been flat, which is good in terms of we stopped that decline. As we bring in this new CSP and OSO, I definitely encourage you all to reach out to other areas that have been seeing their Wagner Pizer numbers spike. In the conversations earlier this week when we asked, hey, how did you all do that? I think really it's kind of a cultural mindset change about, hey, when people walk through the door with the American Job Center, most likely they want to be pursuing a job. And if so, go ahead and enroll them within Wagner Pizer. Has been the kind of the feedback that we've gotten there to increase your Wagner Pizer numbers. That being said, it seems like even if you were just to keep on keeping on, you should be able to hit this Wagner Pizer goal this year. Any Wagner Pizer comments?
Are things like this being discussed with the, forgive me, their new titles,
Yeah.
the Wagner Pizer regional directors?
Yeah, the assistant directors, I think.
Yeah, they've renamed
Like
them.
Siobhan. Yeah.
Siobhan, Georgina,
Yeah.
and Gina. This is their area, and I feel like, well, doesn't matter what I feel like, but I think that pushing this down through them to really look at those Wagner Pizer enrollments and how Title III staff are serving.
Right.
Let me just say that I feel like all these numbers, everything we've talked about today could be better served by Title III staff getting more involved with the customers, enrolling them, working with them, finding ways to serve them versus self-service in the resource room.
Right. Agreed. For sure. One not to completely start a rumor mill, but one thing that we've been pushing is, hey, Wagner Pizer is like 70% of all of our enrollment, right? Yet we don't have on the state like a director or like a person that's like in charge of Wagner Pizer, which I think has been kind of had it like billowing in the wind to some degree. And so that's one of the things that I've been pushing is like, hey, when we're having these staffing changes, could we possibly have Wagner Pizer as a dedicated person to address? So
that might be a good thing. They need somebody steering that ship and forcing compliance with a lot of things Wagner Pizer related.
Right. I think like Troy does a great job with youth. Matt, you do a great job with adult dislocated worker. It'd be great to have like a point person for Wagner Pizer. On to youth. This is what we're looking like as a state. And then God, why? I am so sorry about my slides, you all. I'm going to change my mouse before the next presentation. North East new enrollment. This is in school youth. Okay, this is all youth. Sorry. This is kind of your historic. Why is it changing? I'm not hitting anything. Really, like I'm making jokes of this, but like very frustrating. Apologies. This is your historical achievement, and these are kind of the goals that you've agreed to. 21, 21, 21. Just to point out here is one thing that we were looking at and speaking with Troy was this kind of seasonality that happens with youth in particular. And I don't know if you would want to maintain the same annual total, whatever 21 times 4 is, 84, I believe. But perhaps consider breaking out that 84 in a more historically aligned way. So like this dark green line, 18, 15, 23, 28 would be alignment with your 5-year average about what fraction of the year goes in what quarter. Would that be something you all would be open to? I know that the curveball here is with the summer youth work experience.
Right. Are you asking to go back to the historic numbers or?
Right. And so basically I have even a tool here. Let's see if I can. So this is a tool that I developed. Luke, do we have the answer?
Hey, yeah. So I just got off the phone with the director of the Office of Reentry, and so I just did want to clear up a couple things that you guys have made points about regarding our grants. And I apologize, I'm out of breath. I was talking and walking. So with the Justice Involved grant that we sent out, we understand that the initial grant amount was for 80,000, and then the grant was a reimbursement grant. So we needed you guys to actually send more bills to us for us to reimburse. I guess the total of the amount that was reimbursed was 40,000 or half of the 80,000. But we were able to go all the way up to 80,000. Just wanted to clarify that.
No, that we had two different grants. It's two different grants. We had a 80,000 and a 41,000 for a total of 121.
Okay, that makes
We
sense
had
to me.
the
I thought
Justice
that it was
Involved in the customer focused government CFG. Yes, we had both those, and we spent 100% of both of those.
Okay. That's all I wanted to confirm. I thought we were talking about the Justice Involved grant, the first grant that we did. But anyways, that's besides the point. So we are willing to negotiate on the target. We understand that 109 might be daunting, and so we were thinking if it would be possible to split the difference between the 109 target we're asking for and the 88 target that you guys are countering with, to put us somewhere in the ballpark of 95 per quarter. it would be an increase of about 30 enrollments from what you guys are asking for.
I'm open to that.
Okay.
We'll do the best we can.
And we really think that it's attainable, not like, obviously we're just looking at it top down, but we also do have additional funding streams that have opened up. We have the CRRG grant that just came out, and that's a grant for $100,000. And things like that aren't going away. So I guess just always be looking for opportunity like that. And if you want, the Office of Reentry can just make sure that you guys are in the loop when it comes to those types of grants, so that you guys can be on the ball when it comes to applying and things like that.
Yeah,
and just
our TCAT got that grant announcement and we did not. And, we talked about it, but the due date was right in the middle of all of our year-end fiascos, so we
Right,
just
right.
didn't feel like we had time to do anything with it.
Yeah, we had a crazy timeline on this grant. I completely sympathize. You guys would have had to put a proposal together in less than 2 weeks and send it to
Yeah.
us. So we understand that. That just happened to be the nature of that grant specifically. Going forward, though, we do want to be able to continue that CRRG. So there will be another opportunity to apply and try again.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And just to speak to this, thank you for meeting us in the middle on that. One of the benefits about having higher KPIs is it kind of demonstrates Northeast ability, or the things that we're just talking about, right? That this is a priority for Northeast, and if that could be shown in the numbers, that helps when it relates to these additional funding opportunities, right? And like in the worst case scenario where you weren't able to achieve the goal, we would of course ask why, and the answer would be like, hey, these were the funding opportunities you the state weren't able to provide, right? So hopefully KPIs can actually be a boon to these additional sources of funding, if that makes sense.
And your question back on youth, Ben, I like it more spread out. It's just historically, I think our career service provider has been like the push at the end, and I don't like that. It makes me nervous.
Right.
I want them to be and I think again that'll take care of itself, but I like more
More flat.
yes, please.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. And I just wanted to make sure that was an intentional choice, right? So
Yes.
cool. So we'll keep those flat. See how many tabs I have open is many. All right, we're back.
That makes my OCD go through the roof.
You're not even seeing how many tabs I have open on the other screen, right? All right. So we just did youth, and I think next up is in-school youth, if we can get there. Okay, in-school youth. So this is what Tennessee has done as a whole, and well done, everybody, on as it relates to in-school youth. Like we've been really growing. This is what in-school youth looks like for Northeast. And again, I imagine this is also part of your provider switch.
Yes, it is. Sorry, I'm talking with my mute on.
Oh, you're good. And so basically just to why do we have it in school youth KPI at all? And the reason is we just want to make sure that we maintain Northern Middle as a best practice here as relates to in school youth. But one of the things that we just wanted to make sure is we want to make sure that we maintain our youth waiver, right? And so basically the way that we're doing that is asking that 30% of whatever we agreed to for youth goes into in school youth. And so basically that maintains that flexibility of up to 50% of that could be in school youth rather than, what is it, 20% normally?
25,
Right.
I think it's
Yeah,
75,
20.
25.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to serve in school youth. We're good with that.
Excellent. And last but definitely not least is the youth work experience KPI. Troy, I know on other conversations you've wanted to talk about the difference between phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah, and I'll do it real quick here. I know we're running short, but good morning, everybody. Phase 1, I know Northeast wasn't able to participate this year, but that's our governor discretionary fund where you had to follow the same rules as WIOA. Phase 2 is where the only requirement is the age limit. 14 to 24 is all we're looking for. We don't have the barriers. We don't have the training. We don't have the objective assessments with it. What we're doing is the age. So if a youth was to walk in your AJC, the age from 14 to 24, we should be able to get them the work experience. The governor and commissioner's goal is to get as many youth work experience as possible throughout the state. And this is the way we're trying to achieve that this year.
And then like Troy said, the emphasis is on as many people, as many youth as we can serve under that, regardless of whether or not they would be eligible for Title I. That being said, if they are eligible for Title I and you do want to co-enroll them, just to be clear, they would count towards both KPIs. And then the other data note is enrollment trumps funding source. And what I mean by that is that should you, and I know, Brian, you're talking about funding is really tight for Northeast, but should you want to dedicate some of those Title I funds into youth work experience, those would count towards the youth work experience goal. It's not the SYEP goal, it's a youth work experience goal. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that flexibility there. So that is the end of the slides. I know we're half an hour over. Just so you know, in the attachment that'll be sent out along with this recording is all of these maps. We have the distressed counties, how they changed, local contacts. I owe you all state contacts, CSEP providers. And then what is next is we all owe you the closeout report for program year 2022. We have, of course, the state board meeting coming up later this month. And then finally, one of the pushes this year will be to give you all more timely data. And what that means is to move towards automating a lot of this process and putting them in dashboards so we don't have to like train you all on the best way to pull reports and leapfrog over that rat's nest would be fantastic. So thank you all for the great feedback as it relates. Thank you, Luke, for having looks like you were like Superman running down the street to get those final numbers as it relates to justice involved. Thank you all, and I will see you on the next call.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Ben.